So, Jason, we're coming off of some very intense couple of weeks. We've had CERAWeek, which was end of March. Then you were at IGF
hmm
and you were at RPE.
Yeah.
What are you hearing is kind of the trends and what we expect for the year to come when it comes to energy transition?
Yeah. It's interesting because every conference was different in terms of what people were focusing on. And I think with CERAWeek, obviously, I think the conflict in the Middle East had just started. And, here in the energy capital of the world, a lot of the conversation was around energy resilience. You were actually at the show, so I'll let you speak more about it. But it felt a lot more in the moment. Whereas when we go to IGF, that's hosted by the National Lab of the Rockies. They just got their new name. And that's more of a networking conference. And a lot of the discussions were around big industrial technologies that really touched all over the globe. And the technologies that received best pitch included technologies that covered things like critical minerals all the way to HVAC. It was amazing to me how much biotechnology was there, where biology mixes with energy. And then you go to RPE, and it's two things that people were discussing. It's AI, and then how we power AI using fusion specifically. And I was amazed how much that was central to the discussion. And on the one hand, fusion feels like it's really far away. It's probably really far away. RPE is the right place to talk about it because that's the place where these high risk technologies need to get funded.
The long term.
The long term strategic energy sources that would not be discussed anywhere else. Like fusion should probably not be discussed at CERAWeek if we're thinking about the horizons that people
How
think
much
about.
how much capital did you say was being used to fund? Was it like
Fusion?
Yeah, fusion.
Don't quote me on this, but I think I heard a couple of times $13 billion has gone into fusion technologies over the last, decade.
Is that government funding? Is
No.
that private investment?
So in the US, it's not government funding. And I think they
Interesting.
were talking about like I'm going to say a $200 or $300 million program to support a specific type of fusion, but that's pennies compared to the 13 billion that went out. And I say that's the US. It was very clear that there's a concern about competitiveness globally, where China is clearly, from a state-funded perspective, putting a lot of capital into fusion. And I can only imagine that's going to double down with what we're seeing in the last few months because it's clear no country wants to have their supply chain tied into conflict in the Middle East, where we've seen how vulnerable the supply chains are around the Strait of Hormuz and all the countries around it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think what we heard at CERAWeek was like it was very geopolitical heavy. A lot of the conversation on the executive side is what I heard. And in Agora also, I was like, where's all the CCS and hydrogen? You found it to be like a flip from what it was last year, totally different. A lot of talk on AI, data centers, how do we power them? Talk of natural gas together with CCS, so that's always good. You also saw that, usually a lot of the big oil and gas companies have these houses and they put a lot of investment into being present at CERAWeek. And at the Agora, which is their innovation part of the conference, many of them didn't have their houses set up. And it could be because geopolitically we're seeing, people don't know what to invest in right now. But it could also be because people are also questioning like how advantageous it is for them to be there and put their, marketing dollars at CERAWeek. Is that where you see all the startups that need to be in terms of like Agora? So that was also interesting, which is why, we do our energy tech market event where we had, over 50 startups come in throughout the day, either pitching or through the matchmaking session. And we also obviously had a panel focusing on AI and where the investment's going to come from to fuel these data centers that require a very different type of grid than what we need to power our households versus a data center that needs really intense, reliable power.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, Andy said was like, we can't just rely on the utilities to solve the problem of the grid. We really need to rethink about how the grid is set up. We can't just patch it up because the demand that it's going to require is, we're talking in gigawatts.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? The grid was built at a time where you had centralized power production and you had a bunch of these little loads kind of at the end, right? A house maybe takes like 1 kilowatt on average and 10 peak. And that was great for the way the grid was set up.
Yeah.
But now we have the opposite where you could have power anywhere. Like my house produces, 4 kilowatts when the sun's shining. And then you need to funnel it all into these, these big data centers where they're talking about megawatts of capacity. And to go on a side, when we were at IGF, we got to see some of the data racks of the future. And these are liquid cooled pumps for these things are huge to like just get coolant through. And they were talking about I think they were talking about 4 megawatts of power through a rack. Right. This is just kind of a wall mount. And you imagine a data center is going to have racks and racks. So it's just almost a reversal in terms of how the grid is built. Right.
Yeah. So I think it's going to require a lot of grid innovation. It's going to require innovation in terms of data centers and cooling. And we were seeing a lot of that as topics. Also, I think it's becoming clear, like, as we're thinking about our pilotathon coming up in September, what should we focus on? And the trend has been this year, it's local domestic energy.
Yeah.
Right. And often that means, solar, wind, renewable energy and batteries, along with natural gas, as long as, we have it.
Yeah. We have plenty of natural gas. It's just we're subject to a global market, right?
Yeah, but it also depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So not
because you still got to get it to that market. So as a founder or even an investor in CERAWeek, like how would you navigate it next year? What advice would you give to someone coming in 2027? Yeah.
So I would say CERAWeek is the place to be if you're a founder or an investor, because it just does attract a lot of people. And the way that they set up the Agora is great for those interactions. So even though they have like parallel shows, 5 or 6 shows happening at the same time, there are people pitching. Most of the value that I have heard that founders get is just like walking from one place to the other. They run into somebody, they have a really good conversation. And it's like in a matter of 3 or 4 days that you're there, that serendipity that creates, that you run into all these people, these high density areas that allows for you to make more progress than you would sitting on your computer sending emails to these people that you're trying to connect with.
Yeah. So if I think that the ticket prices feel expensive, and we're not going to quote it now because it'll be different next year. But how do founders get into the show?
So I think you need to start planning for it early on. So they have early bird pricing. So if you know you're going, like keep your eyes on that. And I think that's almost like 50% off. Plus, if you are members of Energy Tech Cypher or other incubators, accelerators, they often get a discount. So that would still, maybe give you up to 40 to 50% off. That would still be maybe $1,500. $1,700. Who knows? They might raise the price again next year.
Yeah.
Also, keeping a good relationship with people that are connected to CERAWeek, S&P Global, because they'll get you in. And this is kind of my lesson learned is it's not necessarily about the best company that's going to go and pitch there, but it's about who recommended that company, right? And who had good relationships, and because it's all a relationship type of business, I guess, at the end of the day.
And one of the other options to get kind of plugged in is the Rice Alliance hosts Energy Venture Day. That's something you apply for, I think, like a month or so ahead. And amongst the companies who get in, 36 get selected to pitch at George R. Brown. And I assume they're going to do that again next year because it's very well attended. They run a practice session on Tuesday, and then I think a full with speed networking. And then they run kind of the competition itself right at the show.
Yeah. And then you find partners, right? Like if you have a pilot with one of your, EPC companies, see if they're there. They'll give you a ticket. Or, I've heard some scale-ups, they didn't want to pay, the 10,000 fee to be there and to speak, but they went to one of their clients and said, can I go and speak together with you on your panel?
Can we talk about a case study we did together? Because companies are always looking to showcase how they're innovative. And to bring in that kind of founder with them is part of the, I guess, I don't want to say the price of admission. That's too obvious, but it's part of the marketing, right?
Yeah. And so the takeaway is like, don't be afraid to ask. If you know someone, like look at who's on the website, who's speaking, where. And if you know someone, ask them, and they might be able to pull some strings and get you on there.
Yeah. I also really enjoyed on Monday night. I hope we do it again next year. We help support Node in their, I guess it was a happy hour or after party. I forget what we called it. That was a good event. It was right over
Nightcap.
Nightcap.
Yeah.
That was right over
It's too late for me, but yeah.
it was right over at Axelrad. And I was, it was great to see a bunch of faces I hadn't
Oh,
seen in a
it's
while.
great.
And I was amazed how many investors walked in the door. I think I counted 50 different investors working in early stage climate and energy, and they were coming in when I was leaving. I think I was on my way out and I saw New Climate Ventures coming through, and it was like 9 p.m. And so it was definitely a good place to have conversation in, a lower stakes environment. And Axelrad's pretty cool.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and so even if you are not going to CERAWeek, you don't want to invest in being there either all week and invest in the ticket. There's so many side events happening. It's almost like you have a breakfast event, then you're at CERAWeek conference during the day, then you have like a pre-dinner event, then you have a dinner, and then you have like a nightcap.
Yep.
And so it's like a full almost 18 hours
Yeah.
that you could be like networking. Most people don't have that stamina, but it's even if you're not at the conference, you can get access to a lot of these other side events. And I think that adds a lot of value. And I think overall, what I'm going to say is like a lot of founders ask us, should I be investing and setting aside like 20K every year to be going to all these conferences? Because you have to get the tickets, you have to get, hotels, you have to like buy the entrance fee. And, that's especially if you are fundraising and finding clients. I have found it to be more effective that happens in person versus sitting on your computer and sending emails. It will go a lot slower. So you can really speed up the process by going to some of these events.
I was to jump ahead a little bit. I was at IGF and they threw up a nice slide that said an ask that's conducted in person is 35 times more likely to result in an outcome than a cold email, right? And so that FaceTime matters just because of how people work, right?
Yeah, we're humans after all.
Yeah.
We like to see other humans, especially in this like super digitalized AI world today. We don't get enough of those interactions.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about tech market. We had like 3 things attached to that.
Yeah, so we did investor matchmaking. What was surprising to us is that more investors signed up than founders. And I was like, where are all our founders? But that was a really good experience, very valuable. We had the big strategics show up, here in Houston, that's where they're headquartered. So if you are outside of Houston and you want to connect with strategic CVCs or just industry in general, and that's how we set up our matchmaking. It's not just investors, it's potential clients of yours. So that was very valuable. Then we had 2 panels. One was focused around AI in power demand, and the second one around folk manufacturing, which was, we had Laureen from Hertha Metals and really talk about, some of the challenges of building her first pilot.
Yeah, she's building a whole steel refinery here. This is amazing. It's like, we're going to take steel away from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no, it's impressive. And her story is impressive how, she was able to kind of, how she put it all together with like they just kind of, with their bare hands,
their own
put
grit.
it all together with their own grit. So,
Yeah.
And then we had, we included some pitches from our co-pilot accelerator program that ended in March. Out of the 14 companies that took part in the co-pilot program, 4 of them have potential pilots lined up.
Good. Yeah.
And, 4 out of 14, like I think that's a pretty good rate for like 1 year because these pilots do take a long time.
Yeah. No, that was really good. And then we partnered with Latham and Watkins to do a VIP dinner. And this is an example of times we were just able to bring the community together, and we were not the only ones hosting one.
Yeah.
Right.
And those are great because no agenda. You just get together, the right people who there'll be some connections made. And there's so many people that I meet, who have founders who've come to me and corporate partners who've come to me and said, because we came to your event, we have started working with this founder.
Yeah.
We have a partnership together. And that just, is really what we're trying to do through these events.
And one of the secrets there is, I think, people get invited to a lot of things. They commit and then they drop out because life gets in the way. And if you're a founder who wants to be included, you should just reach out and ask to be on the wait list. And we can release those a few hours ahead. And I think we had a few founders like text us an hour before that they wanted to come, and we let them in.
Yeah.
And so that's fantastic because there's always room.
Yeah, and the moral of the story is be
Be
friends with us.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say be aggressive, not just with us, but with anyone else.
With
Just
anyone, yeah,
ask.
just
Yeah,
ask, just ask.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. Good.
yeah. And then IGF, I think I want to talk a little about National Lab of the Rockies.
Mm-hmm.
They took us on a tour of this amazing facility, and I think what I didn't really appreciate till we were doing Cipher was that there are a lot of national labs across the country. And the history here is the national labs were set up to support the Manhattan Project. But afterwards, after we had kind of built this weapon system, they needed to figure out what they were doing. And so there are different labs with different specialties. And the one in the Rockies specializes on commercialization, like go to market. And that's why they host the Industrial Growth Forum. And the Growth Forum has evolved over the last few years where it's not, it used to have a showcase component, and now it's almost just about networking and pitching. So we're in this situation where I think there was like 400 founders there. There were, I think, 300 investors, and it was just speed networking table almost a day and a half straight. And it's definitely a different format, but a place you can go to make a lot of connections. For that one, I would recommend, because I didn't do it well, getting set up early, and you actually request matches through their online platform, and it's kind of first come first serve. So you want to fill up your calendar before anyone else, and if you don't, you're just kind of left with who you can catch in the halls. And I think the founders who were prepared got all the meetings they needed, and then those who weren't were just sitting there to wait to see who was available and grabbing an investor who would walk by. So there was a lot of value there, but it was amazing to see the lab itself and just all the testing capability they have. Everything from, I think I mentioned earlier, testing high performance computing systems, these next generation data stacks, to they can simulate a whole house or a whole commercial building. And if you have a new technology that's for prop tech, they have the capability to help you validate data with both live and virtual simulation systems. They were also had a whole room of every kind of a car charger, because you need to test like how these systems perform and if they work. And it's capability you never want to build for yourself. Like honestly, if you can, sweep in and get your system validated, I thought it was a perfect facility
Mm.
for that. So that was very impressive. Um, yeah, and then the other thing that I think was interesting was RPE. It tends to move around. This year, well, RPE is a government conference because when you start, they bring out the flag and you have to do the national anthem. It's like every year. I always forget that it's always like that.
Oh, wow.
But it was a good experience to see where the thought leaders want to deploy capital. And I think I talked a little bit about fusion, and what's really evident is there's a lot of high technology, high risk technologies coming out, but there are people thinking strategically, not just about if fusion should exist. Like we know fusion works, it's in the sun, but there's a whole value chain around fusion that needs to be built
Mm.
that's more than the reactor. It's the fuel system, because apparently it's not just hydrogen that goes into fusion, like
Mm.
it's a special kind of hydrogen. They like to make it with lithium.
Mm.
There's the metal that conducts all the power that needs to go through. And I saw some magic superconducting ribbon that was amazing how much power it could consume or could flow through it. The whole next generation of magnets that need to be built
Mm.
to support this. There are laser systems that have to run that are, much more than the laser printer we have at home. But all that technology needs to be built. That's more than just, can we get a reaction to work? And it's interesting to see that there's a whole industry kind of being born today that needs to exist in 10 years. And that's really what RPE is doing in some ways. And I think that's what's
Fascinating.
really fascinating about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
great.
Good.
Yeah.
So with
Awesome.
that, we'll do another update probably after Dallas and EarthX and
Yes.
OTC.
Yes,
So
we're going to be at EarthX, and then and maybe we shoot right after that, and then another one at OTC. So
yeah.
we'll see you guys soon. Thank
So,
you.
sounds good. All right.